Hello, and welcome back to Stories from History, where we go over some interesting stories from history, whether that's about certain people, places, or events. If it's an interesting story from history, we are here to tell it. And today I thought I'd go over, super interesting story that has become a lot more popular in recent days. And it's about the rise of the Indo-Europeans, the first people who were drinking milk. Pastoralist nomads who kind of invented the chariot, were the first people to ride horses, and had a very warlike society that spread from kind of the the Pontic Caspian Steppe around Ukraine and Russia throughout the whole of Europe, stretching all the way to India, parts of the Middle East. These guys left there an insane genetic legacy, and a lot of people today are descended from them. And I thought I'd go a little bit in depth about their history because it's super interesting. And without further ado, let's talk about the Yamnaya, the steppe riders who changed Eurasia. So we go back 5,000 years on the endless grasslands north of the Black and Caspian Seas. A people lived there who would leave a mark far larger than the physical traces they left behind. They built no great cities, they didn't carve any monuments in stone, they didn't even leave a written language. But from these windy steppes, they rode outward, and in doing so, they helped reshape the population, languages, and cultures of half the Eurasian continent. Archaeologists call them the Yamnaya culture. So let's talk a little bit about life on this open steppe where they came from. They lived roughly between 3,300 BC and 2,600 BC across the Pontic Caspian Steppe, which was a big ocean of grass which stretched from modern Ukraine and southern Russia to western Kazakhstan. And this type of landscape creates a particular type of people. The steppe was beautiful, but it was very unforgiving. Winters were very harsh and cold. Summers could be extremely dry and hot. And settled agriculture was very difficult out there. So instead of farming villages, the Yamnaya people, they lived as mobile pastoralists. They moved around with large herds of cattle, sheep, goats, and entire communities traveled together across the seasonal grazing routes with their animals. Their homes were often wagons and temporary camps, and they followed the rhythm of their animals. So life here demanded endurance, it demanded strength, and it demanded mobility. And these guys weren't sedentary farmers tied to fields. These were people of the horizon. So, the skeletal remains in particular revealed some very interesting things about the physical lives of the Yamnaya. Many were tall for their time, with an average male height of around 5'7" to 5'9", which was noticeably taller than many of the Neolithic farmer men in Europe, which had an average height of around 5'4". Their bones show signs of intense physical activity. They have strong muscle attachments, long distance movement, physically demanding labor. And these people were accustomed to traveling vast distances across open terrain, managing herds, and surviving in a very challenging environment. Over generations, this lifestyle produced communities that were mobile, resilient, and hardened by life on the steppe. And they were warriors. Many Yamnaya graves contain weapons. Stone battle axes frequently appear in elite burials. These axes were not only tools, but symbols of authority and warrior status. Archaeologists have also found spearheads, daggers, and arrowheads. And some skeletons bear signs of healed injuries, evidence of violent encounters during their lives. Because life on the open steppe was competitive. Groups competed for grazing land, water sources, and access to trade routes. And mobility allowed rapid movement across large distances. In such an environment, raiding and conflict between clans may have been very common, as we see amongst many nomadic pastoralist societies throughout history. The emerging image is of societies where warrior leadership and clan loyalty were central to survival. So we'll talk a bit more about wagons, horses, and the power of mobility. One innovation that transformed the steppe societies was the wheel. The Yamnaya were among the earliest cultures known to widely use ox-drawn wagons. So these allowed entire families, along with supplies, children, and possessions, to move across the steppe. And wagon parts are often found in elite graves, which shows the cultural importance that these types of items had to the Yamnaya. Horses also played a growing role in steppe life. While full horseback riding may have been gradually developed, horses were clearly a part of Yamnaya society both economically and symbolically. And together we find with wagons, herds, and horses, they create something new in human history, which is large, mobile societies capable of moving across entire continents. And we see this great expansion. Around 3000 BC, populations that were associated with the Yamnaya began moving outward from the steppe. They expanded westward into Europe and eastward towards Central Asia. In Europe, their influence appears strongly in archaeological cultures such as the Corded Ware culture. For many years, scholars debated whether this spread represented cultural influence or actual migration. Then ancient DNA changed everything. Genetic studies showed that large numbers of people with steppe ancestry moved into Europe during the 3rd millennium BC. In some regions of northern and central Europe, steppe ancestry eventually made up 70 to 75% of the genetic population. This was one of the largest prehistoric population transformations or replacements ever discovered. So we'll speak a bit more about the mystery of the vanishing male lineages, because the genetic story becomes even more striking when we look specifically at male ancestry. Before the steppe migrations, European farming populations carried many different Y chromosome lineages. Within a few centuries of the steppe expansion, many of those earlier male lineages almost disappear from the genetic record, and in their place appear lineages associated with steppe populations, the most prominent of which are R1b and R1a. Today, these haplogroups dominate much of Europe and very large parts of Eurasia. In some regions studied, the replacement of earlier male lines was almost complete, as in they were almost completely erased. What this suggests is that the expansion of steppe populations was strongly male-driven. Incoming groups of men may have established dominance over the local populations through warfare, and integrated with local women, while replacing earlier male lineages, which basically means coming in with their wagons and swords and taking over a village, either killing all of the men or exiling them and taking their women. So pretty prehistoric. Exactly how this has happened is still debated. A lot of scholars point to warfare and elite dominance. Some try to say migration and social integration. Usually we find that the truth may involve a mixture of both, but the complete replacement of the Y males probably strongly suggests that warfare and violence played a part. And the influence of these steppe populations didn't stop in Europe. Later migrations associated with steppe descended groups moved east and south across Central Asia. These movements are often linked to the spread of Indo-European languages, and one of the branches of these languages would eventually become Indo-Aryan, which eventually began to appear in ancient South Asia. The genetic evidence suggests that steppe ancestry reached parts of South Asia during the 2nd millennium BC, and this is associated with populations carrying the R1A lineage. This migration likely contributed to the spread of early Indo-Aryan languages. And today, the Indo-European language family includes languages spoken by billions of people. This includes English, Spanish, German, Russian, Persian, Hindi. One major theory, the steppe hypothesis, proposes that the early Indo-European languages spread outwards with the steppe pastoralists. If this is correct, then the movements that begin with cultures like the Yamnaya helped to shape the linguistic map of Eurasia. A culture from the grasslands of Eastern Europe may have helped give rise to languages spoken across half of the world. Think about how cool that is. But as we see around 2600 BC, the classic Yamnaya culture begins evolving into steppe societies. And these included cultures such as the catacomb culture, the Poltavka culture, the Srubnaya culture. And these successor groups carry forward many steppe traditions: pastoralism, kurgan burials, and warrior identities. Rather than disappearing, the Yamnaya legacy continued through them. So you may ask, why do the Yamnaya matter? Because for most of modern archaeology, the Yamnaya were just one prehistoric culture among many. But with the rise of ancient DNA research, their importance has become clear. Their migrations appear to have contributed to the genetic ancestry of many Europeans, the spread of Indo-European languages, the rise of Bronze Age warrior cultures, the transformation of prehistoric Eurasia. Few prehistoric societies have left such a wide imprint on human history. And it all began 5,000 years ago, with mobile pastoralists riding across the grasslands of the Eurasian steppe. They carried with them wagons, herds, weapons, and traditions that were shaped by the harsh landscape that they lived in. And it was over generations that they moved outward, into Europe, into Central Asia, and beyond. They left no written history, but their legacy survives in languages and cultures, and even the DNA of millions of people. It was from this open steppe that the world was changed.